rise in issues that are directly connected to how much screen time children have. And so we have made it a mission to research and to try to share with parents, grandparents, and kids, just to get the word out of the dangers that the things that can happen and the dangers that can happen. I wasn't watching for the thumbs up, so, okay. Make sure I know how to use these buttons. This is our clinic. That's just, we have 3 gyms, but that's the big picture down below is one of our gyms. What you can see, the scooter boards and trampolines and ball pit. So that's what I do all day, is I play all day long. It's the best job ever. We swing and jump and run and do obstacle courses, and we dress up on Halloween. I'm the sloth there on the end. And my boss and some of my coworkers as well. So first question is, what is considered a screen when we're talking about screen time? Just get this out of the way. Tablets, iPads, Kindles, portable DVD players, TVs, handheld video games, video game consoles. Some people even consider, some experts say that if you have your headphones in and you're shutting out the world, that actually is considered screen time. The DSM-5 is the newest version of, it just has all the diagnostic criteria for mental health diagnosis, and the DSM-6 is going to be coming out sometime next year, I believe, and they are going to include technology addiction in the DSM-6. Also, just if you are interested in any slides or information, I have a little sign-up sheet somewhere. Is this it here on this table? Oh, there's one at each table. If you put your name and email address, I promise I will not solicit you with anything. I will just send you some information about like this criteria and some other slides that I think might be beneficial. Let's talk a little bit about what is this diagnosis is going to entail. The first thing is preoccupation. How much are we or they thinking about it when we aren't using it? Can I play your phone? Can I play your phone? Can I play your phone? When can I play your phone? What time can I play your phone? If I do this, can I play your phone? Or play my video game or whatever it is. Withdrawal. Do they cry or have anxiety or moodiness when it's taken away? Do they need more and more time? Tolerance. Do they need more and more time to be satisfied? Just give me 5 more minutes. Have you been unsuccessful in attempts to control the participation? Do you have to hide the controllers? Or put a lock screen on your phone? Or have the iPad hidden? Have they lost interest in other hobbies or forms of entertainment? Continued use despite knowledge of psychosocial problems. I have a daughter who's 19. She goes to the high school academy at the community college, and she had a conversation about technology and the impact on teenagers, and she said that most of the kids, the teenagers, young adults in her class, said that they knew they were addicted, but they didn't care. And so that's one of the signs of actually having a true technology addiction, is that you continue to use despite knowledge of the issues that it causes. Deception. Are they sneaking or hiding to play or to watch something? Is it used for escape or to relieve a negative mood or to pacify behavior? The child's crying in the grocery store, and they're sitting in the cart and they're crying and asking for things, and then we're like, here, use this. This will pacify this behavior. Or they're following you around the house, bugging you, and you're like, go watch TV, or go here, play the iPad for a little while. I need to get something done. In long road trips, we put on the DVD players, right, to pacify that behavior of, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And so we're using it as a cure for boredom. And we're going to talk later about how important boredom is. So, my little crying babies. Babies and toddlers are actually more susceptible to technology addiction than teenagers and adults. And that is because their brains are literally wired to make things happen, and for that to be gratifying to their brains. And so their brains are actually developing 10 times faster during infant and toddlerhood than at any other time in their lives. And so they're creating these neural pathways at an alarmingly fast rate, and everything that they do is creating new neural pathways, and they're literally wired for that. So they turn their head, the arm goes with it, right? That's to grab a toy. Or you touch their hand and it squeezes. All of their brain is literally wired to make things happen. And so there's a huge study right now that the federal government is doing, and they're about 2 or 3 years into it. I think it's going to be a 10-year study. And some of the research is coming out. There's a series on 60 Minutes or one of these documentary shows, I can't remember, but it's a Katie Couric series. It's Your Brain on Technology, and she talks about some of the things that are already coming out from this study that the federal government is doing. And one of those things, they took 15 toddlers and they gave them 3 toys. One was a toy guitar that you strummed and it played music, and then 2 were iPads. One of the iPads was wired just like a guitar, so you just played it and it just played guitar notes. And then the other one, you played the guitar, and not only did it play the guitar notes, but you got some sort of lights and bells reward in addition. And they were allowed to play with each toy for a specific amount of time and then asked to give it back to the research assistant. And so 60% of the toddlers gave back the guitar. I mean, toddlers will be toddlers, right? So sometimes they're like, no, this is mine. And then the iPad only playing guitar notes, they also gave back. 60% of them gave back the iPad that just played guitar notes. But that number dropped down to 45% of the toddlers who were willing to give back the iPad if they had the one that played the lights and the sounds. And there's a lot of studies out that talk about how active screen time, where you're like making something happen, like games like Minecraft and Fortnite and some of these other games where you literally do something and something happens, are a lot more dangerous than just something passive like watching TV. And we'll talk more about that, why that is later. These are the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines for screen time. Children under 18 months old should not be exposed to screen time. That includes passive, even having the TV on in the room with a baby. And then from 18 to 24 months, it's high quality programming as an introduction and only watched with a parent and for under 1 hour per day. From 2 to 5 years old, it's 1 hour per day of high quality programming co-viewed with a parent. And then over 6, it's consistent limits and no more than 2 hours a day. And that includes all screen time. So, yes?
What's the definition of high quality programming?
What's the definition of high quality programming? Meaning that it has some sort of value or you're learning something from it rather than it being like My Little Pony or video games, some sort of high quality, even if it may be an educational game, but something that is actually, there's a learning aspect to it. Yes. And then they also recommend that meal times and drive times be screen-free. I know drive times are hard. I was just thinking about, even for myself, like if I'm riding in the car as a passenger, what am I doing? My husband and I just took a trip to Moab, and we were hiking in Arches and Canyonlands National Park. We had a fabulous time. We drove all around, lots of driving time, and when we got back on Monday, I gave this, a very shortened version of this speech to another church actually on this same road, which is interesting, but I was thinking about drive time and how much time I spent on my phone while my husband was driving, and I missed out on that time that I could have been having a quality conversation with him. I mean, we spent a lot of time hiking and talking, but still, I think that meal times and drive times being screen-free applies to all ages and not just to children, something I definitely need to work on. When they do MRIs of the brain, they have found out that as little as 1 hour per day of screen time is changing activity patterns in the brain. So that's definitely something that's impactful and we need to be thinking about. So this is the pyramid of learning, and we focus on this a lot at my clinic. So the bottom of the pyramid you can see is tactile, vestibular, and proprioception, and I'll go into details about all three of those, but those are the basis for all other learning. And it's the foundation that our kids need, and it's completely necessary to build additional skills. So you can see all the way up to academic learning is at the very top, and then reflex integration, knowing about where your body is in space, all of those things, attention, all of those things are built on the bottom of the central nervous system. So tactile exploration is the ability to perceive the detailed shape or texture of something. It's using your hands to grasp or manipulate objects. And for it to be effective on the central nervous system, it needs to be active, not passive. So it needs to be a sequence of contacts. So you touch the carpet of this chair, or feel the carpet under your feet, or touch someone's face, put your hand in your pocket. What does that feel like? Those things provide the tactile experience that we need for higher level learning. Screens provide very little in the way of a tactile experience. You can imagine what it feels like when your hand runs across the screen. It's the same feeling every time, or you're pushing the buttons on the remote controller on the video. You need this interesting, rich textural experience in order to develop more complex thinking. I love these little kids in the dirt. Like, that's the best thing ever. This little guy over here, I can't even take it. But playing with blocks, with stuffed animals, pots and pans, all of those things, that's what provides a complex sensory information, and that is what a developing child needs. Screens don't provide that. The next section, proprioception. So that literally means body awareness. Do you know where your body is? Everybody close their eyes. Can you feel where your leg is? Do you know where your leg is? Do you know where your arm is? I work with children every day that when they close their eyes, they cannot touch their nose. They draw pictures of themselves and they're missing parts, or they have arms coming out of their heads, or their eyes are floating on the outside of their faces. They don't know where their body is. Or we have the kids that as they're walking, they're bumping into everything, right? They don't know where their body is in relation to other objects in the room. Or they don't know how hard or soft to push something. They slam every door. Maybe you know some of these kids. They don't know, they might hit, as a response, but they hit way harder than they even think that they did, because they really don't recognize where their body is in space. And so, or the opposite end of the spectrum with these kiddos is that they're really insecure about their movements. So they won't go down slides or climb, or they walk very timidly. They avoid stairs. They prefer activities they've already done lots of times. We have kids, when they come into the clinic, we have an activity board with little pictures. They choose their what they want to do for the day. And these kids that are avoiding proprioception, they pick the same things every time. The things they're comfortable with, the things that their bodies already know how to do. And so the proprioceptive system is activated by your joints and the joint capsule. That's where it's activated. So as you move your body, you're actually then activating that proprioceptive system of the body. The same way as when you look at something, you're using the sense of your eyes. When you move your joints, you are activating the proprioceptive system. And this system is also responsible for your posture. So you see kids that are kind of slunched over like this, or they hold themselves really rigid because they just don't have that system of their body activated. So you can see how screen time, sitting, you're not activating this proprioceptive system. Sometimes these kids, they don't have personal space. And so the prolonged sitting, I mean, if you think about how much kids sit already in school, or while they're doing their homework, or when they're riding in the car to and from activities, or on the bus, there's very little in the way of muscle and joint stimulation. And so we see so many kids who have underactive proprioceptive systems. Uh-oh, I got this upside down, okay. The vestibular system is located in the inner ear, and it's responsible for the way the body reacts to gravity. So it tells your body where your head is in relation to space, and it detects how fast or slow something is going. And it impacts our relationship with the ground. So I see a lot of kids who have a very poor relationship with the ground, as weird as that sounds. But it has the vestibular system is the basis for everything else, and it has a huge impact on balance, coordination, arousal levels, attention, impulsivity, and it regulates all the other senses in the body. And it's activated by movement against gravity. So jumping, swinging, climbing, anything where your feet are leaving the ground and then going back to the ground, that's what activates the vestibular system. And so kiddos that have a poorly activated or poorly regulated vestibular system, sometimes they're very scared of movement. We see 9 and 10-year-olds who come into our clinic and they slide down the stairs on their bottom because we do our testing upstairs. And so then when they come downstairs, they literally slide down on their bottoms. These kiddos might appear really stubborn. And then on the other end of the spectrum, these are the ones that cannot sit still. They're spinning, rocking, swaying, moving constantly because their vestibular system is unregulated and they're just craving that input, that vestibular input. So they sometimes have a super high arousal level. They're like way up here all the time, and they can't seem to calm down. They have poor safety awareness often because they don't have a good relationship with the ground. So to them, if they jump off of something, I have a child who hurt his leg pretty severely because he climbed up on the top of a motorhome and jumped off. So he just doesn't have safety awareness. He doesn't recognize it, that would hurt. So we have a big spectrum with these kids. We have the kids who scooting down the stairs on their bottoms, but we also have the kids who grab a huge therapy ball and they push it over to a shelf and climb up on top of it to get something that's up above their heads. So again, screen time provides very little, if any, in the way of movement against gravity. And so you have a lot of kids who are not getting the vestibular feedback that they need. So these three systems, the vestibular, tactile, and proprioceptive systems are the basis of the central nervous system. And without them, without those systems being regulated, you start to see gaps in the pyramid. Gaps in motor skills, in emotional and social health. We see so many kids with unintegrated baby reflexes. So you have 6 baby reflexes. I won't go into a huge detail about all of them, but I told you a few of them. When you touch a baby's hand, that's Palmer. When you kind of move a baby backwards and they do this little startle, that's a reflex. When the head turns, the hand goes with it. There's a couple that are involved with crawling. So when the head moves, the hand moves forward to encourage the baby to crawl. There's one that's located in the spine, also related to crawling. And I might be missing some, but I could have a whole talk just on baby reflexes. But I would say that 90% of the children, and that might be low, 95 to 99% of the children that I see in my clinic have at least one baby reflex that's not integrated, and oftentimes all 6. And baby reflexes are integrated by moving. So we put our babies in carriers. We put them in a car seat, and then we carry them into the grocery store and we set them in the carrier, and maybe we put them in the stroller, and then we give them our phone to entertain them, and so they are not moving in the way that they should, and so a lot of baby reflexes are not being integrated. And then, yes?
What do you mean by integrated?
So I'm gonna put down the mic for a second. Hopefully it won't roll away. I'm gonna be on the ground, sorry. When I'm in crawling position like this, and I turn my head, my elbows remain stationary. That baby reflex, which is called asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, it is integrated. My elbows don't move. The kids in my clinic, when I turn their heads, they collapse like this. Because that reflex is meant where the head turns, the arm goes with it. Because it encourages reaching for things and crawling. And so we see kids who are bedwetters, who have attention problems. A lot of these things are caused because these reflexes that should have been integrated by the time, most by 9 months old, are still retained in the body. And so there's a program, an exercise program that you can do, that they can do to integrate those reflexes.
It sounds like you're sort of describing what we might call growing up.
Yes, right, you grow out of it, yes. It's just a natural part of development where those reflexes, you don't need them anymore, and so they are pruned out of the brain. But if they're retained, then it's a process to reverse that reflex. So you can see how screen time limits access to all 3 of these areas, to tactile, vestibular, and proprioceptive. So the brain, we're going to talk about the brain for a little bit. The brain, over the course of your lifetime, goes through rapid stages of growth and pruning. And so you can think about branches on a tree, and our brain has this complex web of branches or neural pathways. And that's all those neural pathways are responsible for everything that we do, for every task that we complete, for our thoughts, for our emotions, our actions. And what we don't use, we lose. That's how the brain works. And so what happens is the brain marks unused synapses or pathways for elimination, and they're literally pruned out, just like pruning a branch off a tree. And that the most significant and rapid pruning takes place between the ages of 2 and 10 years old. So 50% of extra synapses are removed before the age of 10. The next significant pruning takes place between 16 to 20-ish, 22, sometimes late 20s. And this particular pruning takes place mainly in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and that's the area that's responsible for the ability to make decisions, personality, eye contact, critical thinking. And in both cases, what we don't use, we lose. These prunings can lead to physical, social, and emotional developmental delays in both early childhood and in teens. Someone shared a really awesome analogy with me. That's why the pantry picture is up there. So it was at a continuing education course that I went to, and I wish I could tell you the name of the person that I'm stealing their analogy, but I can't, but just know it's not mine. We have a pantry or a refrigerator, and whatever ingredients we have in that pantry, that's what we can make something out of, right? That's what we can cook. If we want to make a cake, whatever ingredients we have in the pantry, that's what we have available to us to make a meal from. So limited ingredients equals limited creations. And what we don't use in our pantry or in our refrigerator eventually expires, and then we can't use it anymore. So screen time limits our children's ability to add new ingredients to the pantry. And then it also, one of the scary things that, and I've seen this in myself, and I've had to check myself a lot on this, is that screen time, it teaches our brains to rely on low quality ingredients. The speed at which information comes to us when we flip a screen creates short, immature neural pathways. And this limits our ability to problem solve or to think in a more complex, creative way. Or we actually get bored with complex information because we're so reliant on short bursts of information. How many of you, when you want to know something, Google it? How many of you think about what the answer might be before you say, Siri or Alexa or whoever it might be, what is this? Yeah. So I've had to, like, you know, how is this cloud formed? Whatever it is, I really had to like start checking myself and say, I should think about that for a minute. It's great to look up information. That's amazing. But our brains need complex thinking. They need to actually, you know, percolate a little bit. And they say that actually one of the ways that we can stop memory loss and those kind of things is from learning new things, right? And like thinking about things and pondering things. New inventions aren't created from someone Googling something. They're created from people actually looking at a problem and sitting down and thinking about it in a complex way. And so I was on Facebook the other day, and I noticed that they started putting on the videos how many minutes the video is. This video will only take 2 minutes of your time, right? Because we just want these short bursts of information, and our brains actually become reliant on those. And like I said before, we become bored with complex thoughts and information. So the activities that provide vestibular input, proprioceptive input, tactile input, those are like adding ingredients to the pantry. That's what we do at my clinic. We add ingredients to kids' pantries so that they can do more things and be more independent. And the kids that we see who have a lot of access to screen time, their ingredients are severely limited. I mean, we are seeing kids that are 13 years old with the balance of a 4-year-old. I treated a 17-year-old boy with technology addiction, and sadly he only came for 3 or 4 sessions, but I had him on the scooter board ramp, on his stomach on a scooter board, and he could not figure out how to motor plan his body to get from lying on the ground to standing up, to the point that he was in tears, because this boy spends 9 to 10 hours a day in front of his computer. Lots of kids who spend a lot of time in front of video games have very poor balance and coordination. And so we're seeing kids with lots of gross and fine motor delays, balance and coordination issues, strength issues, lots of kids who have what we call dyspraxia, where they can't figure out how to do something new with their body. They can do things they've done before. They can walk across a room. If they've played soccer since they were 4, they can play soccer just great. Or they're a gymnast, they can do those things. But we've had gymnasts come into our clinic and they get on the balance beam and close their eyes, and they can't walk across the balance beam with their eyes closed, even though that's what they do on a regular basis. But they can't motor plan new things. Postural issues, tech neck, scoliosis. Scoliosis is I think like a 60% rise in scoliosis diagnoses, and tech neck in littles who are walking around with their necks forward like this, with all that weight and pressure on their heads. Poor posture, weak cores, underdeveloped hands, and then, like I said, these balance and coordination issues that 10 to 15 years ago would have been related to some sort of diagnosis, right? The child has Down syndrome, or they have autism, or they have some sort of diagnosis that correlates with poor balance and poor coordination or poor strength. I would say that at least 50% of the kids that I see at my clinic have no underlying diagnosis, but they have these delays that are interfering with their ability to keep up with their peers. And there was a study in the American Journal of Human Biology that found that children who spend 3/4 of their day sitting, so school counts, right? They're sitting at school. In boys, they have 5 to 9 times poor motor skills, and in girls, it was 4 to 5 times poorer. So, like I said before, we drive our kids to school. They take the bus, so they're sitting, and then they sit at school, and then they sit and do their homework, and then their play is organized, right? They play an organized sport, they go to play group, they play recess on the same things that they see every day. There's no novel play. And so we are seeing kids with sensory, motor, behavioral, cognitive issues, and we're seeing them pop up in later childhood. So the kid is going along and mom and dad think they're developing just great, and then 7, 8, 9 years old, after their brain has went through this synapse pruning, and even in 10 and 13-year-olds, and they're coming to our clinic looking for help because their child now is not able to keep up with their peers. They can't sit up in their desk at school. They are losing their balance, they're falling, they're not coordinated. And then those things lead to behavioral problems often. So we're seeing a lot of kids with behavioral issues. So there's a study in Canada, I think some I don't know what kind of doctors they were, that's terrible, but they started noticing this trend in mammals. So rats, cats, dogs, they play as infants and toddlers, and then that play kind of peaks as they're juveniles. And then once they're in puberty, and into adulthood, they don't really play anymore. And this is also true of humans, right? Little kids play, and then at teen years, then that's when other things start to come into play, dating and these kind of things. And then as adults, we play, it's more than at that point leisure exploration, right? So they've also recognized that the development of the cerebellum, which is the part of the brain that coordinates and regulates muscular activity, like motor planning, coordination, balance, these things we're talking about, it actually follows the same curve. So in early childhood, and it grows, and then it kind of peaks out at puberty, and then it's developed. And so they're like, that can't be a coincidence, right? Play has to be connected to this brain development. And so what they did was they took a group of rats, and one group they let play like normal baby rats, and the other group, they only exposed them to adult rats. And then once they reached puberty, they euthanized them and dissected their brains. And so the group that was allowed to play, they their brains looked normal, like a normal rat brain. The rats that were raised in an environment without play, they had immature patterns of neurons in their brains. And in rats, the part of the brain that controls like motor planning and coordination and stuff is actually their prefrontal cortex. So that was the part of the brain that was not developed in these rats that were not exposed to play. So what these scientists came up with is that they believe that the development of motor skills is directly related to play, and that's active play, not passive play. And it's that before the age of 7, that kids desperately need to have this multitude of sensory experiences on a daily basis. They need to be touching things and running and jumping and climbing and swinging and all of these things in order for their brains to develop and for them to develop strong bodies, and strong hands and strong minds. And they need to be, this play needs to be unpredictable and uneven. They need uneven terrain and ways to move their bodies in ways they haven't before, novel motor planning. They need sights and sounds and smells, things to touch, and then all that vestibular and proprioceptive feedback. And so another thing too is that scientists have discovered is that 2D learning doesn't translate to 3D learning. So if you give a child an app on the iPad with Legos, and you say, here, build some Legos, and they build you this beautiful creation, sliding the Legos around, and then you give them Legos, the learning starts all over. 2D doesn't translate to 3D learning. And so I know people think like, oh, this game's educational, like Minecraft. I know they use Minecraft in the schools, but actually Minecraft is a very dangerous game for reasons I'll talk to you about more later, but it doesn't translate to anything outside of what they're doing within that game. I keep turning this upside down. So I just want to talk to you a few minutes about the development of the hand. Occupational therapists in schools across the nation are seeing more and more kids with weak hands that are not diagnosis-based. So again, we used to see low tone in the hands or decrease in muscle strength in the hands in kids with a diagnosis. Children with Down syndrome, for example, have low tone in their hands. That's part of the diagnosis. But we are seeing kids who that they shouldn't have weak hands, but they do. So this quote, developing your child's hand strength and fine motor skills is linked to more than just handwriting, because we don't write anymore, right? So why does hand strength matter? Because we can type everything, we text, we don't use our hands for writing. But there is a direct connection between switching from right brain learning, which is your creative emotional brain, to left brain learning, which is logical, critical thinking brain. It's directly connected to developing the tiny, tiny muscles in the hand, the intrinsic hand muscles. So we're seeing kids, not only do they have weak hands, but they can't get out of right brain thinking. They're more emotional, they have more emotional outbursts. Because their hands are not developed. And playing video games, even this, does not actually develop these little teeny tiny muscles in the hand. And it's scary to think about, because I think a lot of people believe that hand development isn't important anymore, just based on technology. We have all this technology, we don't need the development of the hand, but we really do, because it's connected to our emotional health. So there's a rise in children receiving occupational therapy services in the schools across the nation, about 30 to 45% increase in kids. So in the schools, it's not like what I do. In the schools, occupational therapy works just on fine motor. So they work on handwriting and hand strength. And so schools across the nation are seeing more and more children with an underdeveloped hand. I think it's like 20% in Chicago, 30% in New York, 30% in California. So this book right here, Disconnected, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing book written by a psychologist, Tom Kirsting. He says we can no longer just allow our children to be disengaged from their peers and to be pacified by a screen. He also said that face-to-face interaction is the only form of human interaction that can foster confidence, emotional regulation, and empathy. We are seeing, and psychologists and doctors and parents and lots of people across the nation and around the world are seeing so many children with delays in social and emotional skills. I would say that most of our new kiddos that are coming into the clinic, even though, yes, they do have underlying motor skill issues that we find out when we test them, but the initial complaint is a behavioral problem or an emotional problem that the parents are having, and they're coming to us for help. So neural pruning, like I said, it applies to social and emotional development as well. Since the rise in technology and social media, there has been a decrease in social coping skills. Kids have less charisma. They have a poor ability to keep eye contact. There's a decrease in communication skills. Kids are they're needier, they're more emotionally fragile. They're less confident in their ability to make and keep friends, and they have fewer feelings of being normal. A lot of the kids that he interviewed in this book say they feel more connected than ever before, but the loneliest they've ever been. So they're connected to everything, but they're completely and totally lonely. They also have increased feelings of peer pressure. I love this picture, this big game room. They got a pool table and art stuff and everything, and they're laying on the pool table watching something on a screen. We're seeing a lot of kids, teenagers, with a flat affect, meaning they don't have facial expressions. Those things can be pruned out of your brain. The ability to actually change the expression of your face. Mine never, I wish I would have had a little pruning for mine, but so kids that are going to college and then they're interviewing for jobs, and these businesses and employers are saying, I don't even know what this kid is actually thinking. They have no affect. They're void of facial expressions. They won't make eye contact with me. There's no charisma. Yes, they're qualified, on paper for the job, but they are missing something. So they don't have body language. All of those things can actually be pruned out of the brain. And again, that whole complex thinking, that reliance on short neural pathways and short bursts of information where people are actually bored with complex information. I get so sad when I go to the park. My phone's down here, but I go to the park to walk my dogs with my family, and I'm walking around and I'm seeing people with their families, and they're walking around at the park like this. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? Or at a restaurant? How many of you go to restaurants and people are like on their phone? We have a rule, whoever picks up their phone first pays for dinner. So that whole, the whole need for face-to-face contact, that's the only thing that develops empathy and all of confidence and those things. It needs to be face-to-face. So I already said that. Okay, yeah, so the inability to process complex information actually then leads to depression, anxiety, self-esteem issues, poor attention, and then impulsivity. So these shortened neural pathways then lower what we call emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, or EQ, is the ability to use, understand, and manage emotions in a productive and healthy way. So a low EQ is a weak connection between the emotional part of the brain and the logical part of the brain, right and left. And so face-to-face interactions without distractions are what strengthen that connection between right and left. So emotional intelligence includes self-awareness, self-management, motivation, empathy, social skills. You can see up here someone with a high emotional intelligence. They're warm, enthusiastic, charming, but someone with low would be easily distracted, selfish, a poor listener, impulsive. And if anybody wants this slide, I can send it to them. There are a lot of psychologists that agree with Dr. Jean Twenge that says we are on the verge of the biggest mental health crisis our country has ever seen. And you will hear that if you talk to any psychologist right now. I know that they will tell you the same thing. And it's because we don't even look at each other in the face anymore. This is a quote from someone who left Google. I don't know if I can read it from up there. Let's see, I have bad vision. There's a whole playbook of techniques that are being used to get you using the product for as long as possible. Phones and apps are being designed to capture and keep kids' attention. This is about the war for attention and where that's taking society and where that's taking technology. They have a playbook of how to get you addicted to their apps. If you follow the money trail, big tech companies have spent millions promoting screen-based learning in the schools, and that's despite current research that's showing that it's not the best. Test scores are higher for students who take handwritten notes than who type their notes. They did a huge study at West Point among some of the most brilliant people in our country, and they gave some of them screens and had some of them take handwritten notes. And handwritten notes, it conceptualizes ideas in the mind. And it increases the ability to store and retain information. So this is where it gets a little scary. In this study that the federal government is doing, they took MRI scans of children, 9 and 10-year-olds. And they found that they had a premature thinning of the brain's cortex. So you can see the red brains, that's thinning of the cortex. The cortex of the brain is responsible for motor movement, balance, coordination, strength, those kind of things. Also for memory, and a lot of other brain functions. So in 10 years from now, experts are saying that we will start to see 20 and 30-year-olds who have early onset dementia or some form of dementia. Also, they did MRI scans of kids playing video games, like Minecraft was one of the main ones, and that particular game and some others, and just actually even swiping your phone to unlock the screen, release the chemical dopamine, which has a pivotal role in craving and desire. And the brains of children playing Minecraft look similar to the brains of adults using cocaine. And the other thing is that you have so much these chemicals as you use, and the little brains are not prepared for a dopamine bath. They're not. And so the brain is literally getting bathed in dopamine. And so these kids, that's the whole craving and desire thing. So it's leading to other forms of addiction, and also then for adrenal fatigue and other things as they get older. We have kids who are wired and tired, literally, because their brains are dopamine, 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 and that blue light, blue light, blue light, and then we have sleep disturbances. I mean, we see so many children who have a hard time falling and staying asleep. And also that dopamine release is more prevalent during active screen time than than just like reading, like on your Kindle, reading a book or something like that. But if you're playing a game or doing something like Candy Crush, or I'm trying to think, I don't play a lot of games on my phone, but those kind of games that like have these bells and whistles, the dopamine release is greater. Fortnite, Minecraft, I don't have all of them written down, but that they use for the study. But this right here, that red brain in the 9 and 10-year-old, that actually looks like the brain of a 60, 70-year-old. This is a little video. Do I make it play from here, or should it just play?
As more young people like David hole up in their rooms with their devices, studies show a generation delaying adulthood. Fewer get driver's licenses, have after-school jobs, or date. But most alarming, the suicide rate for girls ages 15 to 19 doubled between 2007 and 2015. Dr. Larry Rosen, a leading psychologist, is especially concerned about what all this tech is doing to developing brains.
We know what the blue light does to their brain. Night after night, it leaves these little molecules called beta amyloids, and they build into plaques. And when they look at the brains of Alzheimer's patients, they have a lot of plaque in their brains. And I think that we're heading toward a major problem as these kids who've been using phones for the last 10 years start to get into their 20s, 30s, and 40s. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of memory problems coming up.
Wow, that's pretty scary. Tech is not only affecting our brains, it's also affecting our creativity.
When you are being creative, or your mind is wandering, or you're dreaming or daydreaming, a different part of your brain is activated. Part of what we're doing to ourselves, as well as our kids, is that we're not allowing enough of that time. Because it's so easy to just pull out your phone and check the news or whatever, it doesn't matter. It stifles your ability to live within boredom. And boredom is important because boredom then clicks in the creative activities. We don't allow ourselves to get bored anymore.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying earlier. I've been really working on allowing my brain to get bored because it is so easy to just fill up those empty moments with screen time. And also just know that blue light is what he's talking about that's building up plaques on the brain. So if you have a phone, computer, and you have access to a blue light filter, I would definitely encourage you to put that on your device. And blue light before bed can cause the melatonin to not release, and it can disturb sleep patterns that then can lead to other mental health issues. Just going to talk for a second about speech delays. Sensory input is imperative to language development. I've been working at my clinic for just over like a year and a half. I graduated from college 3 years ago, I think, and then took my board exams. And so I've been working at my clinic for about a year and a half. When I first started working at my clinic, they'd give me a new kid on my caseload, and they're like in the second percentile for everything, like across the board. And I'm like, what do I do with this kid? Like, I just graduated from college. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I would just be like, okay, let's go on the scooter board, and I'm going to swing you a little bit, and we're going to jump on the trampoline. Like, that's literally what I would do. And then I would reevaluate them in 6 months, and they would make like 2 years of improvement in 6 months and be like in the 16th percentile. And I'm like, oh yes, this actually works. Or kids not talking at all when they come to us, and then just watching their speech just take off. It's just been really miraculous to me, and made me like a real believer of this whole vestibular proprioceptive tactile. I'm getting better at what I do, hopefully. But the thing about speech is that if you are looking at a screen, or how many people see moms at the park and they're sitting on the bench like this and they're talking to their kids like this? Oh, don't climb on that, honey. You can't see your mouth. And babies and children need to see a mouth moving in 3D, not 2D, in order to develop speech. And then that whole ping pong back and forth of you make a face and the baby makes a face and you make a noise and the baby makes a noise. If you're absorbed in your screen, then the baby is missing out on that, or if they're absorbed in a screen. Kids who watch TV before 1 year old are 6 times more likely to have a language delay. And then if a child watches more than 2 hours a day, then it also increases the odds of a speech delay, and it's linked to attention, memory, and reading problems. Too much screen time is. I've kind of talked about this already, but boredom is weightlifting for the brain, and it's unstructured play is so important for kids. They need to play in a way that they're making up the rules, that there's not this set of rules already pre-described for them with a variety of sensory information. I love this quote. A preschool teacher, she's been a teacher for 40 years, she said, "Kids are just different. They are more easily frustrated, often crying at the drop of the hat. They are frequently falling out of their chairs at least 3 times a day. They are less attentive. They run into each other and into the walls." She says, "It's so strange you never saw these issues in the past." Free play encourages the development of the 2 skills that no robot can replace: creativity and teamwork. I'm going to read you another quote about play. The experience of, this is from a neuroscientist whose name is Sergio Pellis. He studies play in mammals. He's the one who did the study with the rats, now I know. The experience of play changes the connections of the neurons at the front end of the brain. It is those changes in the prefrontal cortex during childhood that help wire up the brain's executive control center, which has a critical role in regulating emotions, making plans, and solving problems. Play is what prepares a young brain for life, love, and even schoolwork. To produce this sort of brain development, children need to engage in plenty of free play, no coaches, no umpires, no rules. Unstructured play allows children to construct ideas through hands-on experiences, and these sensory experiences that involve touch, sight, hearing, smells, vestibular and proprioceptive input, they help development in the gradual progression that it's supposed to take, and then they help provide a basis for understanding concepts in language, math, literacy, and so on. Let's see, I might skip some of this. There's a lot of long-term studies out that show that kids who are in play-based preschools and kindergartens actually end up with higher test scores later on in life. And they have an increased capacity for language development, social and emotional awareness, problem solving. So I just want to show you guys the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines again. Under 18 months, avoid screen time, even passive with the TV on in the room. 18 to 24 months, high quality program, co-viewed with a parent, under 1 hour per day. 2 to 5, 1 hour per day, also co-viewed with a parent. And 6 years and older is consistent limits with 2 hours per day for entertainment purposes. I know that a lot of what I'm sharing is a little shocking probably, and I just don't want anybody to beat themselves up over it. We didn't know, right? We still don't even know what the actual long-term dangers are going to be, but we are responsible for whatever knowledge we have and what we acquire. So I just encourage you to do some additional research. Come see us at our clinic. If you have any questions, you can call, email us. We'd be happy to talk with you. If you feel like there's a child in your life who could benefit from some of our services, we would be happy to talk to you about that as well. Don't beat yourself up. Just move forward with what you've learned. There is some tips and strategies for parents, which I can email to anybody. No electronics in the bedroom is a huge one. Limit your own media use. We all need to be the examples for our kids and grandkids. It's okay to say no. The in this Disconnected book, he has a child who doesn't have a smartphone, and he says people ask him all the time, like, at what age should I give my kid a smartphone? And he says, when you're comfortable with them viewing pornography. That's his answer. At what age should a child have a smartphone? Don't miss your kids' moments in your kids' lives to attempt to catch a moment, right? We watch our kids' sports games through our video cameras. You know, be there, be present for them, and store those memories in your mind. Set aside a screen-free family time every day. It's okay for your kids to be bored. It's good for them. You know, we have to be the examples for our kids and teach them how to turn inward and to think about things, and to have that percolating of the brain, and then, you know, play with your kid. It's okay for us to for our kids not to have instant gratification. If you feel like your child has some form of technology addiction, we recommend a 21-day fast from all technology. And we have seen kids who have made huge improvements, kids who came into our clinic who couldn't even smile, and then they do the 21-day fast, and their whole countenance changes. And then things to buy instead, I can email this as well. Swings, trampolines, family outings, toys that require the use of both hands, Play-Doh, slime, all of those kind of things, Legos and building blocks. There's no place like being outside. Yes. Books, yes, books. Yes, and there's a whole study about conceptualizing reading and how, like, just the touch and the smell and turning the pages and stuff, actually you retain knowledge better than reading on a screen. So when we make play the foundation of learning, we teach the whole child. And I love this little poem. I tried to teach my child with books. He gave me only puzzled looks. I tried to teach my child with words. They passed by him, often unheard. Despairingly, I turned aside. How shall I teach this child, I cried. Into my hand, he put the key. Come, he said, play with me. And so now I'm going to turn the time over to anybody who has any questions. Hopefully, I'll be able to answer them. Yes. Yes, I think that that only children sometimes do struggle more. Also, but more about just that everything's structured. So even if you have an only child, you know, we used to be able to play with, they used to be able to play with their neighbors and things like that, but now we're afraid to let our kids go outside and play. They have a lot less free time.
Just if you could repeat the question so the video.
Oh, she was asking if I believe that it had something to do with people only having one child or less child so they can't play with their siblings. Yes.
So this is good news, what I've heard that older teens and college age are getting back to board games, which requires a relationship. And so I think some of the young adults who grew up with technology, I think hopefully they're realizing doing that. To me, that was good news because they're getting back to board games.
She said that she has heard that a lot of young adults are getting back into board games, and she feels like that's good news. They're starting to realize that all this technology is actually damaging. My daughter is going to be 20 in September. She's had learning disability delays her whole life, and we got her a smartphone when she was 16, and very bad mistake. I really wish that we would not have done that. It made her desire to try to fit in, like, just exasperated it, and she went through some really hard years for a couple years, and now she still has her phone, but she's deleted all social media off of her phone, and she started attending the high school academy. She's actually going to graduate. She's been in school for 15 years, and she's going to graduate this in the next few weeks, and they actually asked her to be the speaker at graduation, and they were just impressed with her ability to think freely, and so that was really awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. And she made that choice on her own, so that was awesome. She recognized it for herself, and started really practicing this idea of mindfulness and like really thinking about things, and it really lowered her anxiety and depression without medication. So, any other questions? Yes.
Heard about the impact of screens on the younger kids, 5, 6, 7, 8. What about like the older adults that suddenly discover the internet and dive in and become, I guess, social media junkies, internet junkies, news junkies? Have you seen anything in that realm and the impact there?
So he's asking about what impact screen time has on older people, not children. Well, for one thing, blue light causes plaque buildup regardless of your age. So that if you're looking at a screen and you're exposed to blue light, then you are developing plaques on the brain. And so, yes, it is impacting. And addiction doesn't know age. So, yes.
You also mentioned something about a blue light filter. What exactly is that, and where can someone get that?
So all the new cell phones have a blue light filter built in. So if you go to your settings, I have mine turned off right now because it changes the color of the screen a little bit. But if you just go to your settings, then you can turn the blue light filter on, and it makes the screen kind of a little yellow tint. And newer computers should also have a blue light filter. If you wear prescription glasses, you can get a blue light filter built into your glasses, or you can buy a pair of blue light filter glasses. Yes.
From a previous talk, there is a handout.
Okay, you want to make copies of that? That would be awesome.
Because it has that learning pyramid, and it has tips on the back as well as the guide.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I told her I didn't bring a handout because I literally just got back from vacation on Monday morning, and one of my coworkers quit, and I've been working nonstop. Plus, this is my second speaking engagement this week, so I've just been a little bit busy. But I'm happy to be here, but I've been a little bit busy. Any other questions? Yes. I actually don't know if I can answer that. Maybe I'll think about it for a few minutes and then Google it if I want to give you a technical answer. But it is the light that projects through the screen pretty much. So if you see, I can show you on my phone the difference between with and without the blue light. It just makes everything brighter. So if I take the blue light filter off, you can see how it has like a kind of a blue tint. And then if I turn it on, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Nope. If I turn it on, see how now it's a little bit yellow? So that's blue light and that's without. I wish I knew the actual true answer to that. Somebody might.
So if you don't have it on the blue light, that's clear, that's not good for your brain.
So if you have it on, if you have a blue light filter turned on, then you're causing less damage to the brain as far as plaque buildup. But you're still dopamine release and the tendency for addiction and all that those things still exist. And I don't know if the thinning of the cortex of the brain, they're not saying whether that's related to blue light or if it's just from screen time in general, from whatever.
So, on the end of this question, is blue light just automatic in our cell phone?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. It's just there. Yeah, it's how the screen projects light in a bright, nice, beautiful way. Yes.
My question is, many of us are grandparents.
much more screen savvy slash addicted than we are. And so our grandbabies are impacted by this. So I just know if I sent this display, the presentation to my daughter and my son-in-law, what kind of reception I would get. Because they would take it as a criticism. So how do we gently, as grandparents, what do we do?
One thing I think, just by being an example and inviting and being involved in their lives in a way that isn't screen time, outdoors or whatever it is, family dinners, board games. Also, I think that I feel like suggesting watching something like that, the Katie Couric, Your Brain on Technology is very impactful. It's definitely not something I would let small children or maybe even teens watch. There's a lot of things about self-harming behavior and suicide and those kind of things. I don't know, maybe some other grandparents in the room have some suggestions. We get backlash even at our clinic because it's the same as when, probably when people were told to not smoke at some point after doctors had been prescribing cigarettes and things, right, as being something healthy. And then we found out later that it's actually not healthy. And so I'm hoping that as more and more research comes out, people will be more receptive to it. But we get a lot of parents who say, who are you to tell us, what we should be doing in our home or that this technology is bad? So she was responding to the question about how grandparents can help their children without it being offensive to them or seen as an attack on their parenting. And she suggested that they share the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines for screen time and for what ages. And I can email that to anyone. It wasn't on that handout, was it? Oh, it is? Oh, awesome. It's on the handout. Perfect. I made the handout, but I don't know what's on it. Yes.
Not a question, but to answer sort of that, from my standpoint, I'm 30 years old. I took away my daughter's tablet when I was 27 and she was 3. It was a huge fight, but we recognized that it was our fault for giving it to her, and we were giving it to her to babysit, essentially. And it became, I have to have it now, I want it all day, and it's that instant gratification that she craved. And the only answer for us was just to take it away and fight it out. And we fought it out for months, and eventually she just stopped asking for it. So
that's awesome.
there was no easy
that right there is a round of applause.
There was no nice, easy way to do it. We had to buckle up and take it away and let her be mad.
So what he was saying is that when his daughter was 3, they realized that there was an issue with how much she was wanting to have the iPad, and so they just had to cut her off cold turkey. And it was a fight, and it wasn't easy, but was it worth it? Now it's better? Yeah, so it was worth it. Yes.
I can speak from a grandparent, because I know my grandchildren, the TV's on all day, and they have tablets. When they come over to our house, they say, play with me, Grandma. Granny, they want me to play with them. They don't need the iPad to go to sleep. And we just play, and we watch them once in a while. But one time my grandson said, God was tired, let's watch something. He went to it was on a computer Grandkids, but we used to.
So she's saying her answer is to play with her grandkids. When they're with her, make sure that it's all playtime, and I think that's really important. We have kids who come into our clinic and they always pick to play a board game. I mean, that's just something that they just love so much, is to just play a board game. And we usually make them get on the scooter board and bring the pieces up and down, or do an obstacle course to earn their turn. But we have a lot of board games, and we play board games with the kids, even if we just are having them lay on their belly and work on their core and neck strength and get that proprioceptive input put through the ground, just feeling the whole ground on their body while they play. It's important. Yes.
How kids get to your clinic? Are they referred there by doctors? Do parents just come in and say, you know, I think my kid has a problem?
He's asking how kids are referred to our clinic, whether it's by doctors or parents just walking in, and it's both. Some insurance companies require a prescription from the doctor for occupational therapy services, and some say, oh, you can have 40 visits or 24 visits. If a child has a diagnosis of autism, they usually get unlimited visits, and they don't need a prescription from a doctor. So it just depends on the insurance. But we have a lot of parents who hear about us from someone else, and then they're like, oh, my kid might need those services. Yes?
So what is your email address when it comes through?
My email address is on my business card. It's terrible. The email address is campcankids@gmail.com. And anybody who wants my business card or one of these little prescription cards, feel free to take one. So campcankids@gmail.com. Any other questions? Yes. We take those too.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at, you do what young people, but is there things for teenagers? Is there programs out there that parents can kind of get their kids into, to get them away from that?
He's asking if there's programs out there for teenagers to kind of get them out away from their screens. He's alarmed by what he's seeing in a rise in suicide rates among teenagers to what they're seeing just looking at a screen and comparing their lives. I don't know personally, like in the Tri-Cities, what kind of things are out there for teens. But I do think that it's important to encourage teens to have face-to-face social interactions, to get them out of the house, and to be engaged with their peers face to face. And if we as parents and grandparents can facilitate that in any way, inviting teenagers into our homes and saying, you know, this is screen-free time, here's a basket, put your phone in the basket at the door. Have games and snacks and all the things, you know, that some of us grew up with, and just have time to spend together, because like the video said, I mean, kids are dating less, they're driving later, they're staying home longer, and those things are definitely a problem. And get the screens out of the bedrooms. TVs, video game consoles, phones, get those out of the bedrooms for sure.
I was on a retired school nurse, and at one of the school nurse conferences, this was discussed. And for me, one of the biggest problems with smartphones and tablets is pornography. They said 8 and 9-year-old boys are getting hooked on pornography, and those companies know, like the Kentucky Pokemon, they know that they're going to make a mistake, and it's the same one, and it'll come, and they think they'll get it. That's right. And that's a huge, huge problem.
She's talking about the problem with pornography and how companies are manipulating popular searches to then have 8 and 9-year-olds have access to pornography. And pornography addiction is rampant in the world right now, sex trafficking, all of these things, and it's really alarming. Actually, there's a watchdog group right here in the Tri-Cities because there is a sex trafficking problem here in the Tri-Cities. My boss is part of the watchdog group to help try to get some of these girls off the streets. That is, I mean, the kids that come into my clinic, they have developmental delays, but they talk to me about how they can hack the firewalls on their Chromebooks. So they can get around those things and access other things. So yeah, definitely that is one of the issues with too much screen time. And pornography is highly addicting, and it destroys lives and marriages. And the other thing about, I just want to say one more thing that I forgot about earlier, and it just popped into my mind, so I'm going off topic now. But one of the studies that they found in rats was when they gave them a screen like this with a scroll and then a computer, and they had them looking like this, it caused permanent brain damage. So that multitasking between screens, which teenagers do notoriously, they're doing their homework on one screen and they're looking at their Snapchat on the other screen. It's very damaging to the brain. And that's for everyone. So don't multitask between screens. Yes?
So you talked about how children as well when they're looking at screens, they see when they're handling, well, in school now they're looking at Chromebooks, iPads, and they have all of this access to technology. So are you sharing what you're finding with the school district?
Yes, I will actually be at the Richland School District at their technology meeting next month, yes. I don't know how much they're going to let me speak, but like I said, it's a money trail to follow, and these big tech companies have spent a lot of money to be in the schools. They've given a lot of money to the schools, and so that's hard to fight against.
But I am worried because in a year, he's going to be starting kindergarten in a public school district. So how do I counterbalance what exposure he may be getting with technology in school with what I'm doing?
I think we need to be huge advocates for our kids in the schools and just make our voices heard. I mean, even if nothing happens right now, we need to let the schools know, even if you don't have a kid in the schools, email the school, the board of the superintendent, let the schools know how you feel about it, and let your voice be heard that way. And then just make sure that the limits at home are as much as you can make them. And also, I would be a huge advocate against some of the games that they're using in the school, like Minecraft. I know they use Minecraft specifically as an educational tool in the schools, and it's a dangerous game. So, yes.
I'd like to say that next year at Hanford High School, there's going to be 2 advanced math classes that the parents have complained that their kids are not able to get their algebra skills and their geometry skills because they're trying to do it all in the Chromebooks. And math is a skill that you learn by, you see it, hear it, say it, reason it, and you do it. And by doing it all on the Chromebooks, the kids are complaining they're just not getting it. And the parents have specifically requested classrooms that are not computer-based, that they are the traditional model of they hear it being said, they see it on the blackboard, they take notes, and then they take the notes home, and then they actually have homework. And math is one of the disciplines that is shown that homework is a necessary part of learning because you are doing it in process. And so parents make a huge difference.
Were you able to get that, do you think, or do I need to repeat that? Okay. My daughter, when she was a sophomore, I think, was when they switched over with where all the learning was on the computer, including the teacher actually didn't teach. The tutorials for the math was on the computer, so they watched the tutorial. That's how they learned, and they could type in a question if they had a question, and then the person would get back to them. We had a huge meeting with her teacher, and she could not understand where we were coming from, that our daughter was not, first of all, our daughter has a learning disability in mathematics, so she was not learning this way. We actually had to hire a private tutor for that year because my daughter was just not, I mean, she was already behind and she was just really struggling. And so, yes, we need to be advocates in the schools, especially, I think, to have some more traditional based learning. I think that technology is amazing. I mean, there's a lot of amazing things that technology can do, but it just has to be within limits. There has to be boundaries on it, right? So, yes.
So we live in Pasco, where, the majority of the community, I think, has at least some Spanish speakers in the household. And I'm wondering, is a presentation like this available in Spanish? Because the parents and grandparents, of course, are the ones who are least likely to have mastered English.
I do have a Spanish speaker in my office. I don't know how well she could translate this into Spanish, but maybe I could come up with some sort of handout that she could translate into Spanish. Or I could look, I assume that on the American Academy of Pediatrics that they have a Spanish version of that webpage, so I could try to look for that as well. If you email me and ask me, so I remember to do that, I will.
So you folks came up with this on your own, and you're not in touch with Pasco schools?
No, this is just our clinic, and yes, we came up with this on, I mean, it's all research-based. It's all based on my research. So it's not my own words, per se, but what I'm seeing as an occupational therapist in my clinic, that's, I mean, there's definitely an impact that we're seeing. Yes.
This is another comment. There's a website, or not a website, but it's a YouTube channel. It's called Jason A. And they give 30 minutes, about 15, 20 minutes long, of what things are going on. And the most recent one was talking about the development or lack thereof of young people with screen time and how the brain isn't functioning, they're going into the deep thought, critical thinking processes. And there was another program several months ago, I believe he was an executive, former executive from Google. He's been interviewed and he was talking about how they came up with these computer programs and they're studying to figure out what triggers people, what captures people. So when you go on a website, even if you go on, you're going to slice, dice, figure it out, and it's all about getting you connected and talking to you.
Right, so he's just reiterating some of the things that we were talking about earlier, that these people, Google and Apple and these big tech companies, they have playbooks and ways that they're working to get you addicted to their technology, and also recommending a YouTube channel called Jason A that had information on brain development and too much screen time. He's coming for the mic.
Before you take the mic, what's your name once again?
My name is Lisa Nelson.
Thank you.
Lisa Nelson. Thank you so much for coming out here to share this. This was hugely informative. You guys learned something new? Pretty, someone say scary? Yeah, it's certainly sobering, isn't it? Thank you so much. She did this purely for free, so, and just doing it, so we're so thankful for that. And I wish we could, because what you shared was worth $1 million.
It's a community service for me, so I'm happy to share that and to be, serve my community that way.
Thank you. I just wish we had even more people to hear this. Why don't we close in a word of prayer, and then we can use the turn on our blue screen filters, and then we go over to get some dessert there. Lord, thank you for this evening, and thank you for this time. Thank you for Lisa, and I ask that you'd bless her and her coworkers and everything and the work that they're doing to try to help and better children and people all around. And thank you for your goodness to us. And may we just go out here in celebrating some of the great things we've learned tonight, what we've seen, and be, again, lights in this world for you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Patrick, is this going to be on our web page?